get into what I want to get into, I want to just cover some bases as well, because again, you're in the D in Detroit, and you know, I've got to visit the place and, you know, connect with it now physically. You know, I came up growing up knowing of Detroit based on, you know, Motown. I think that's what I first became privy of Detroit for. And then I don't think anything stood out up until I got into rap music further down the line. And I think I spoke about it, you know, I had some heavy influences coming out of Detroit, in particular Esham, at 7 Mile. And that whole vibe and connection there. And he gave me some views and blueprints and templates of what the D was all about through the music. And then as I've grown up, I've heard more and more, you know, just the history of Detroit and, you know, the current state that Detroit's in. I don't know where it's at today. I know, well, you guys, just like us, are in lockdown and stuff. But in general, there's a history of Detroit that makes Detroit very unique, I feel. And I felt that when I was there. And I would just like for you to share just a little bit about Detroit, growing up in Detroit. What was like Detroit growing up? Some of the key historical things about Detroit that impacted you, the community. And let's just get a little backdrop on Detroit, man, because many people know that's where you're at. That's where Baba was based. But, you know, everything from, I know, Ford set up there and all, you know, all the rest of it. And we got the Ford over here. We drive Fords in the UK. So, you know, what was the deal, man?
Oh, man. So, really detailed history. So for those that need a reference, I don't know how it's looking on camera, but it's right here. So when you look at the U.S., this is where we are. It's right below the thumb on the mitt. And so Detroit, you know, one of the things that was important about Detroit has always been a very spiritual place and a very poignant place of resistance and culture. So early back in the day, oddly enough, there's been like a lot of evidence of, you know, and I don't know if you're familiar with King Juba and King Juba, Mansa Musa, the various trips that made it over here to the U.S. And so right on the banks of Detroit River, man, it's like mounds of African artifacts, Kemetic artifacts, which shows evidence that since before Western expansion, you know, we had interacted heavily in this area as traditional peoples. And so just setting that background, it was always a very powerful place because it was at the base of 3 major lakes, freshwater lakes, like the basis of like 1/5 of the world's fresh water, which in itself is valuable. And then it connected to 2 major land masses. And so it was fine. Of course, it was Detroit, as the French called it. And then as they came in and colonized it and everything, this was a major place of resistance. So right on the river of Detroit, there's an interesting history. There was a group of natives who were dealing with the French, and they had a plan to just push them off the continent. Wow. And it came down to one of the people had gotten scared, made a noise. The French got alerted, and so Detroit ended up being a French stronghold where they traded furs. People would never come to Michigan because the environment was considered harsh. As you know, it gets cold. There's a lot of mosquitoes and woods. And so that's why they call people from this area Wolverines, or they say, you know. Anyway, as it developed, the British saw interest in it. They began a war with the French. They eventually taken it over. And so when the British took it over, they were engaged in heavy warfare with Native peoples, and we had aligned with Native peoples. And so they began to ask us to go and fight against Native peoples, or as Indians, as Western history calls them. And so most of people went and worked with the Native people. Some had worked with the British. As a result, they had changed the laws of slavery per se. There still was slavery, but it was very small slavery, which made this a place of free. If you got up here on your own, you were free. That's basically how it was set. So at that point, it became a draw point for those runaways. And so, of course, those were the most rebellious, you know. They run away, and Detroit was one of those places they can go. And if they ever had any more drama, they'll just go over to Canada. So this became a magnet for a lot of the rebellious folks that weren't dealing with slavery or that were on the run for warring against slavery. And because of the heavy native population, we had a hub of protection and community that we interacted with. And so from the earliest times, there was a strong Black presence here. Matter of fact, I don't know how many people are familiar with the raid, Denmark Vases raid, but Frederick Douglass had come up here to plan with, oh my goodness, with Frederick Douglass and, golly, I forgot the white farmer's name. Shame on me. Anyway, there was a white farmer who decided to create a civil war and to take out all the slave owners. And so Detroit was the meeting place for that, with him and Frederick Douglass had met, but Frederick Douglass backed out at the last minute. And then unfortunately, the beneficent abolitionist got killed. But anyway, this was one of the historical places where they would come. And so when they would run away, if you were chasing, as soon as you crossed the Detroit line, you knew that you had problems, because this is the one place that slaveholders could come, and if they got caught, they would be treated, they would be dealt with. And so it started to become a real reputation as a place of Black resistance. And so anyway, here comes the post-slavery thing. Reconstruction comes about. First thing our people do, come up to Detroit. There was already an established Black community up here. And we began to occupy outside of the city. And, you know, as American history dictates, you know, there were a lot of Europe or Caucasian people who weren't happy with that. So they attempted to riot. And so this was the first riot in Detroit. There were like 3 or 4 of them. And this happened on Belle Isle, and they just start randomly attacking, you know, Black folks, free Black people, because they were moving in mass, they were getting wealth, they were buying property. And so that was the first riot. And as a resilient people we are, that just made us move in even more. So then more people came. And this led up to the late 1800s, 1920s, where you had, this was the place where, this was Garvey's second headquarters, where Marcus Garvey were organized. Then you had Noble Drew Ali. Then you had Elijah Muhammad. I mean, it just was Hebrew Israelites, Black Liberation Army. It's just so many different movements that came out of Detroit. So growing up here, I had a different perception of the world, you know, and a lot of people from here, we move a little different because we used to having Black power, like Black mayors, Black chiefs, Black, you know. And so
right.
when we move outside of our city, sometimes we're accused of being a little brash toward other people who don't respect our rights, you know. And so because of that, politically, economically, they laid siege on it. As you know, all the auto companies left, all the major corporations left, everybody left. And that's when the famous so-called riots or the uprising went on, in which that was the final straw. So then in like 3 years, like 1 million other people had left the city, and now the city was predominantly Black. Motown was still booming, but the auto industry wasn't there. So now you're talking about the basis of a city's economy. You had over 1 million people here. So of course, crime began to bubble majorly. And that's an unfortunate reputation that we start getting, because with all these people and no money, you know, people start hustling, people start, you know, selling and whatever else it took. And so there were major movements that came out of Detroit that influenced the rest of the country, that unfortunately branded us as, you know, not only Black radical, but Black radical gangster, street people. And so to this day, the city has a stigma, but we are always, and always have been, like a beacon of Black culture, pride, resistance, and development. And so Kilindi came out of that era, and I came under him. And it's a beautiful place, you know, contrary to what you hear on the news. Yes, there's a lot of poverty. Is it caused by people being lazy? No, but it's caused by basically economic apartheid. You know, And if anybody's been to Detroit, you can see what it is. And so, you know, the economic siege they put on us, in which all the major industries left. And for 25 years, we had a Black electorate. And so they put us under emergency management, unheard of in the United States of America. Never before has an entire city been denied the right to vote. And no say-so over our elected officials. For 10 years, it was essentially martial law with one person in control over the whole city, the economy, the police, the fire, the schools. Never before in history. Now, if this was anywhere else, it would be means for revolution. But due to our political, social stance, any resistance was considered being irresponsible, was being anti-progressive. And so, yeah, we had our right to vote for taken from us from 10 years, and they would not restore it. You know, they locked our mayor up, gave him 28 years for a felony that came to like $10,000. Of course, they accused him of 46 million, which didn't prove to be true. So they gave the last mayor we had, you know, the crime sentence of a double murderer who's still in there. And they basically, you know, I'll say it because I don't have to tap dance. They basically held us hostage until we brought back a white political structure. So now we have, you know, a white mayor, we have a white head of schools, and now all of a sudden there's relief funds coming to the city. We recently won a lawsuit because we sued the state for the right to literacy because we had rats and holes and stuff coming, you know, rainwater falling through our classrooms, you know, and literally had police, you know, who had felonies that wouldn't get arrested. So Detroit is an interesting place. It's a snapshot of Black America in terms of culture, pride, expression, progress. It's also a snapshot of Black America when it comes to white policies of oppression and Black expression of resistance toward that. But it's a place that's dynamic. It's beautiful. It's not crazy. No, you won't get shot walking down the street. You'll get hugged. You'll enjoy the food. As you know, Darren, everybody's pretty chill. But just like a lot of places, we suffer from media distortion and not having control over the media or the political structure. And so, you know, to the victor always gets to tell the story at the end. And but we're still in the fight. It's a beautiful city. And I encourage anybody that comes to the U.S., come to Detroit, and you'll get some authentic culture, some real history going back 500 or 600 years. Yeah.
Nice. Man, I do, obviously, man, I had an amazing time when I was in Detroit, and you guys showed me love and took me around. I got to see, you know, all sides, all frames of the game. But I'll be honest, man, you know, it was still a bit of a culture shock, man, just to see how, you know, the city itself and the region, the parts that I was in, how, you know, I could see how it had been a thriving place, a thriving city. You know, you could see the development, the infrastructure in place, but everywhere was empty. You know, it was literally the houses as well as many of the businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, just navigating the streets, and, you know, you go down one street and it looks like it's a normal street, but all the shops are empty, and you hit another street, you know, you bust a right or a left, and, you know, again, the streets are desolate, but the buildings might even have been burnt down or, you know, put on fire. And then you'll take another left or right, and then you'll be in the oasis in the middle of this growing.
It's a big city. You know, and the thing about it is Detroit was the experiment ground for a lot of concepts we know today, like shopping mall. It was the first place for shopping mall, paved streets, car dealerships. This was the first so-called middle class, you know. And so once a certain population got a piece of that dream, they say, oh, no. But it's an interesting place, man, because this was like the original Silicon Valley, man. You know, this was like in 1920s, $5 an hour. I mean, $5 a day. That's like somebody saying, yeah, it's a cat paying $500 a day, and you don't have to finish high school. Like, what? Yeah. So you can imagine that much wealth. Like our grandfathers, they would drop out in 9th, 10th grade, and they'd be able to afford beautiful houses, several cars, send their children to college, let their wife work at home, and still have change in their pocket, you know. And so it was a reality that a lot of Black people hadn't experienced in America. And so Detroit became a real cultural hub for that. And because of that, that's how we developed our political voice. We were able to afford sending our children to law school and get them involved in politics and pay for campaigns. But that became a real threat. And so we learned a lot about how forces that are against our progression or general progression, how they operate. And so it's interesting, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, well, you guys definitely are, you know, you're pioneering a lot, and in, you know, music, I know there's a lot of, you know, music influence. We'll jump back to that later on, but I just want to highlight the food, you know, the food movement, because during that time when I was over in Detroit, you know, I was heavily involved in the food growing movement, and still am, you know, in the UK.
Yeah.
And I saw, you know, a lot that I learned from there, a lot of inspiration. You know, one of the key things that stand out to me, you know, that I experienced in Detroit was just seeing how, I remember the place where I was staying, and I think there was a few abandoned houses or gardens in the area, and they had transformed those, you know, green spaces into food growing spaces. And the local community, everybody from, you know, every member of the local community from, you know, I remember homeless people, drug takers, you know, the well-to-do people all pitching in and, you know, playing a part in keeping and upholding, you know, the food growing scene, simply because there was nowhere to get fresh fruit, fresh healthy food, you know, in the stores and so forth. You know, and I came out of that, you know, being inspired by a quote that I heard many years ago, you know, as a teenager. Just, you know, that especially in the African Caribbean, you know, conscious community, it was said, you know, that change won't take place until 99.9% of the people's backs up against the wall, you know, and that's what it is, you know. And, and I feel that Detroit, man, if you weren't there, you were close. You were closer, you know, with your backs up against the wall, and, you know, a lot of people would have felt it. But what I saw out of that was it brought together true community. And I guess you guys had a basis of community, but I hadn't witnessed anything like that before, you know. And through food, because I know that's a common denominator, I can take that anywhere in the world and connect with people geared around food. That was, you know, outside of me coming for the psychedelic conference, I wanted to check out, you know, the food community and to go and witness what I saw, you know, how the food was being grown, how it was being shared, how it was being cooked up, you know, the cuisines, you know, all the uniqueness about how and what you do, you know, in Detroit. So you mentioned, you know, just your involvement, food security and stuff like that, I know plays a big part in Detroit. So you just share the food, just stuff around food, man, and your involvement, your knowledge of the food thing in Detroit.
Yeah, you know, part of what I do and part of what I admire about you, man, is you know, we work on food security issues, and so there was a huge farm. It's gotten a lot of media. D-Town Farm. This was back the same year I met Ahati Kilindi. You know, there was a movement started around food security because, you know, sometimes we have so much faith in government and so-called rights we don't realize that they don't give a damn about your rights, you know, and certain things we assume that won't happen. So nobody knew like that at one time in the 90s, like there would be hard to find fresh food in the city. You know, it was like unheard of. Or like nobody knew that Flint would be poison with poison water, you know. And so here in Detroit, because there's been certain governmental moves that kind of shook our reality of what government will do if they're indifferent, it got us on a good foot. And so that's when we realized, like, okay, we need to start growing our own food, because they obviously it's not they're not going to take that as an obligation and make sure their citizens fed. And so because of all the vacant land we had, we said, hey, we got plenty of green space, and it was like an organic thing. People began to just like break the ground, put up grow boxes, and it's just a beautiful movement that's going on. And so now just about every neighborhood has some organic, and people are starting to change their eating habits. You know, now people are starting to do backyard gardens, and it's a powerful thing to the effect now that we, just like I think similar to the UK model, we're able to employ people, at least on a small level, you know, have youth engaged through the summer and pay them. So it's really transforming. And like my teacher taught me, you say, there's no culture without agriculture. You can't have culture. That's where all culture comes from. So that's another thing. It's been helping the culture grow.
Nice.
Because yeah, you know, so it's a beautiful movement, and it's getting stronger. You know, and that's something else. Kilindi was majorly heavy and influential on pushing that. You know, pushing food, health, food security. He was majoring in securing D-Town Farm and a lot of things. Excuse me. Yeah. So yeah, it's a major movement here in D, and it's helping a lot of people, and it's changing food policy. So now we are able to force supermarkets to engage and to use our local produce. And it's disrupting that whole global chain. So we don't have to eat carrots from Sweden. It's like I can eat carrots from around the corner. You know what I'm saying?
Makes sense.
Yeah, you know, Michigan grows a lot of apples. We found out most of our apples come from Chile, and then most of our apples are shipped somewhere else. So, you know, we're trying to reverse all of that asinine foolishness because it connects with what? Environment, it invades with pollution, it deals with food costs, it deals with health issues, as we know with this so-called COVID, you know, individuals who are worried about so-called cross-contamination or access just to healthy, fresh foods. And so I think around the world, we're going to disrupt that system, man, and cause people to value what they put in their bodies, man. And I think that's the basis of a lot, you know. Yeah.
Nice, man.
And
it's a nice segue, man, because I want to get into the psychedelics and stuff.